Welcome, everybody. Having some technical difficulties on my end. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I am the co-founder and managing director of Cultivated Media. We are the host and presenter of this webinar. So welcome, called The Future of Native Nations and Cannabis. On behalf of the Cultivated team, we're pleased to be able to bring this webinar to you along with our partners at Vicente and the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association. At Cultivated, we pride ourselves on helping drive critical industry conversations forward through our daily newsletter, through our regular live streams, and through events like this, which happen in both the real world and online. So thank you all for being here today. Today's agenda, we're going to start with a quick check-in with Jason Tarasek from Vicente to set the stage for this webinar, and then a panel conversation that will follow, which I will introduce after I talk with Jason. So first, I'd like to welcome onto the stage Jason Tarasek, formerly of Minnesota Cannabis Law, which you can see he's actually wearing a jersey from there today. And now with the team at Vicente, Jason is a well-established and well-regarded cannabis attorney operating out of the Twin Cities. But before all that, he and I have been friends, connecting through friendship and cannabis for something like 20 plus years now. I'm going to bring Jason on now. Jason, welcome. Has it been 20 years?
At least, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm doing the math.
We didn't look like this.
25. Plus.
There was a lot less gray hair, but about as much cannabis. So that part has remained, I think. Jason, I'm going to bring something up that you and the Vicente team posted on your website and through some socials, and maybe we can sort of talk about this quickly before we get to the panel.
Yeah, this is a really cool chart, Jay.
Let's talk about the chart.
So our in-house economist, Andrew Livingston, worked with ICIA, with Mary Jane and Rob over there in compiling this. And, we didn't really know what was going to happen with it organically, but I think we got this picked up in articles in Forbes and MJ Biz Daily, et cetera, because it really is thought-provoking, and maybe it is newsworthy to a lot of folks who aren't following this as closely as some, as like me, for example. To see how many cannabis programs exist throughout the country. And, I'm in Minneapolis, so excited to see that, we're sort of a hotbed of activity along with the West Coast, of course, but there's no reason there couldn't be more tribes in on this. And I'm hoping as we continue to discuss this topic and webinars like this, more tribes might be interested in launching their own cannabis operations.
I do hope so. We're going to get to the conversation with the crew in a bit. And I'm just looking, it's very heavily weighted west than east, certainly. And but the ones that have been getting the most, at least sort of in our newsletter, are outliers there, one in North Carolina and one out on Long Island as well. Is there a difference between sort of what is happening on Long Island and North Carolina, what is happening in Minnesota, what is happening in some other states, sort of on your north-south, but also west? Are there differences state to state?
There's a pretty profound difference with what's happening in North Carolina. That tribe, if you're following what's happening with state legalization, North Carolina does not have an underlying medical cannabis program or an adult use program. But that tribe, the Eastern Band of Cherokee, decided they were going to flex their sovereignty muscles and just legalize their own program on tribal land. They do have an existing casino there. I've heard it's quite a beautiful spot. I'd love to go check it out. But they did something kind of revolutionary, because every other tribe, to my knowledge, that has launched a medical cannabis program or an adult use program, the state within which the tribe exists had some sort of underlying program. But the Eastern Band of Cherokee in North Carolina did that without such an underlying legalization program.
Interesting. And before we bring the rest on, because we're going to do that in 1 minute, like, what are you seeing as a broader landscape of interest around the country from tribes? Like, what is the conversation? Where is it sort of all over this map, but also in terms of readiness, interest, and have you seen an influx of people interested in sort of this conversation?
Yeah, so obviously my work has been focused on Minnesota. We're working with 3 different tribes here on launching their adult use cannabis programs. Let me think about this. All 3 of them now have dispensaries open on tribal land. Minnesota is a bit unique because our cannabis legalization bill that we passed 2 years ago now had express carve-outs for each of our tribal nations to not only launch programs on tribal land, but off tribal land through the negotiation of compacts, which are just agreements with the state of Minnesota. So again, I'm helping 2 tribes here in Minnesota negotiate those compacts, which when they're done, should allow for each tribe to open as many as 8 dispensaries anywhere they want throughout the state, a manufacturing facility and a cultivation facility, among other things, off tribal land. So that is I think, the unique part of Minnesota's program is that they're not simply confined to reservation land here. It's expressly built into the statute. It's built into the terms of these compacts that will allow them to operate off tribal land. We had 1 tribe here, the White Earth Nation, finalized their compact late last month, and they actually launched an off-reservation dispensary. I know there's one in St. Cloud. I think the one in Moorhead opened for sure, but it's really exciting. And of course, these tribes all talk to each other. A lot of them are related. And so the tribes in Wisconsin, and we're going to bring one of our guests on soon, I mean, they're paying attention to what's happening in Minnesota and seeing the opportunities. But of course, as we'll discuss, Wisconsin, like North Carolina, has no underlying medical program or adult use program, which makes it a little more challenging for them.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I think that's a good segue to bring on the rest of the speakers. So right now I'm going to bring up Mary Jane Oatman, who is the Executive Director of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association, the founder of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition and THC Magazine. Mary Jane will be joined by Rob Pirro, the founder and CEO of ICIA, Candigenous, and Paradigm, all of which we'll ask them all of this about. And finally, Michael Decora, the Senior Intergovernmental Affairs Specialist at the St. Croix Chippewa Indians of Wisconsin, and also an ICIA member. Mary Jane, Rob, and Michael, I'm going to bring you up. Michael, I'm going to bring you up to join Jason and I on stage. Give me 1 second to awkwardly bring everybody up. And Rob will, there you go. And everybody, if they could take yourself off mute, that would be ideal. Thank you all for being here today. And Rob and Mary Jane, my sincerest apologies. Last time we talked, we had a severe, I was going to say cannabis outage. Certainly not here in Toronto, but not electricity either, but internet outage. So everything appears stable today. So Michael, Rob, Mary Jane, thank you all for being here. And I want to, maybe I'll start with you, Rob. Give us a bit about your background in the cannabis industry and how you came to sort of launch and be part of ICIA.
So my background in the industry didn't start until after the Farm Bill. Besides myself being someone that was trying to find good plant medicine for myself over the course of the last, 30 years now. But after the Farm Bill, it seemed to be like an opportunity for people to grow hemp for CBD. So that was my first venture. I'm an entrepreneur, so it seemed like a really good opportunity to showcase Indian country as well, because I sit on a few different boards, one being the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of Wisconsin. The other at the time was the Spotted Eagle Workforce Development Board, which again is, how do we develop our workforce, develop our acumen in Indian countries. So, we're, developing business leaders, which is sort of a sustainable way to build continuity for our communities to grow. With that preface, I created a business called Candigenous. I did a 10-acre grow in 2020. I utilized financing from a community development financial institution and the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Association to provide a case study of here's what you can do, with a proper business plan, with, proper mentorship, with, advocacy from groups like the American Indian Chamber kind of going to bat for me. Where I got financing and they did we were in the annual report to sort of showcase, here's hemp, here's this new plant. It's a plant that, oh, by the way, used to be the #1 cash crop in Wisconsin until the 50s. This is something the tribes could, grow on their communities, develop workforce, all these things. But then the world shut down and COVID happened, right? Everyone's really using CBD and try and relax and curb their anxiety and all these things and maybe get away from alcohol a little bit. And then we saw the evolution of Delta products and hemp derivatives during this time. And, as we know, plant medicine always sort of finds a way. But now we've kind of come into this fold where there's so many things to talk about. It's moving at such a rapid rate. And for me as a business owner at the time, I was trying to just get a pulse on what was happening and what was I supposed to do next, in this kind of new industry, which has black market, gray market, and some, regulated markets. But how do I fit in as a native business owner? So, I scour the internet as we do when we're trying to like find things to join or like, be a part of that can hopefully better ourselves. And there really wasn't anything that I had found beyond a tribal hemp and cannabis magazine, the work that Mary Jane had done. And I talked to Mary Jane at a conference earlier, but there really wasn't like a national association for the development of cannabis and hemp for Indian country. So long story short, we created it with the help of my legal team and some other mentors, some operators in the space. Really did some due diligence to figure out if this could work and build some pillars around how this could, look, but always with the intent that Mary Jane Oatman, who I had met prior at the largest economic development conference in the country for Indian country outside of gaming, where we were having hallway conversations about cannabis and hemp because we were not on the agenda yet. So this was our opportunity, or I guess my opportunity, with my own sort of why for the industry, to plant a stake in the ground and say, hey, we want to build our own table. I know someone that can really articulate this in a good way, federally, regionally, and tribally, which is a really tough thing to do. I think we've kind of given it our best go, and brought Mary Jane Oatman on at the time. Now you're seeing the growth of ICI over the last 3 years. But that was really the impetus, right? Like I've been a long life plant medicine user. I know the benefits. I know the trauma that communities have faced. I know the trauma my own family has faced because of opioids and prescription medications. So I think we all have our own reasons, and luckily enough, I've been surrounded by good people that can take these ideas and implement them into actual business plans and execute at a very high level. And that's what you're seeing right now. Well, with partners like Vicente and Michael Decora and these task force and really this momentum, it's because we've surrounded ourselves with people that execute at a very high level, and I think that is setting a standard, for Indian country that we haven't seen before, and we're excited to take that to the next level. And this map is sort of one of the steps in that next level.
Yeah, Mary Jane, proof that the really good conversations at any conference happen, well, either in the hallway or just outside the front doors, if it's a cannabis show or related to cannabis. But give us a little bit about your background that led to sort of the fortuitous conversation with Rob. I think he said in San Diego. Give a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, we were actually in Las Vegas, and would love for people to just kind of keep, those dates on your radar for not just the work that we're doing with ICIA, but the cross pollination work that we're doing with the large native serving organizations like the Reservation Economic Summit hosted by the National Center. My pathway for this work came from just serving as a bud tender in the I-502 in 2017. I was noticing that the I in BIPOC was just really silent as other states were legalizing with this west towards east migration of cannabis, is that the concept around social equity programs was, kind of birthed into the universe. And that was something that was not in Washington state legislative framework. And so I really just kind of started digging into how we amplify the I in BIPOC and make sure that Indigenous rights of individuals, as well as our tribal sovereigns and tribal nations, are protected and held harmless from state, local, and federal legislation. And of course, there's not a whole lot of federal activity, moving. We always see that, the safer banking conversations or the States 2.0 Act. But we really wanted to make sure that we were building in a collaboration, some consensus building policy initiatives that were for tribes by tribes. And I think that that's really what's powerful going on here. I mean, I'm in Idaho, Jay, so it's not like I'm opening up a pot shop next week. I'm probably going to be fighting charges down the road more than, looking at business development arms. Just keeping my family and loved ones out of jail is my mission here in Idaho. But my grandparents went to federal prison when I was in elementary school, and that's really, I mean, I feel like the core of what I do is advocacy, at heart. But I've worked in education systems, and and I really feel like that's the biggest obstacle that we're facing now is just eroding the almost century long history of negative education about the benefits and the power of healing with plant medicine. So, I think that to it. And that's why I love it. Rob and I are both Pisces, born on the same day. He's my brother, and it's become this, like, he's provided me through the ICIA the opportunity to, flex in my superpower way, and build coalitions of tribes. I mean, we still have tribal nations in Washington state. I just got a call this morning from a tribal council member, from a Washington tribe, a decade after the compacts. They're still looking at how they can utilize their tribal laws, their codes and ordinances to do something bigger and better for their people and their communities and for the citizens at large. So I feel like that again is a part of that education process that we endeavor in, the data collection. There's just so much work to do to become the policy clearinghouse for Indian country for the next 50 years.
I like it. Thank you. Michael, I want to go to you and talk about both your experience and background, but also what is happening in Wisconsin, because as Jason mentioned, he sort of hinted at, I don't know what the right term is it movement, but things are happening in Wisconsin that I'd love sort of your take on, because I think it would be helpful for all of us, certainly, but for the folks that will see this now and ongoing.
Well, thank you, Jay, for allowing me to be on here. And I'd like to say bonjour to my friends over there at the various places. Really proud to be with this group. Yeah, I'm in the anti-cannabis island known as Wisconsin, where we're surrounded by Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, and they have access to what we know is plant-based medicine. And that's the call to action. My introduction into cannabis really began, well, as a private user, as a kid, just to enjoy myself, but really in my role as an advisor to the St. Croix Tribal Council in 2013. The Tribal Council, shortly in September, actually, it was after the Cole Memorandum came out. Our tribal leadership chair, vice chair, and a council member, his name is Jay Emery, he initiated the discussion about wanting to, he knew it as medicine and wanted to really help the membership dealing with addiction and opioids, heroin. So the goal was to trade this medicine and trade it with those needles and pills with our membership and try to help them. And so that was the call to action. So in order to do that, we had to educate and inform lawmakers and other tribes and also folks within our own community. So that's kind of the message and the directive that was given to me. So I started to study cannabis and I started to study the effects. Of course, opiate use was a big one. But it also opened my eyes to a lot of the other issues going out there. Epileptic seizures was a big thing at the time. And so doing my lobbying work for the tribe really started in 2014 after Governor Walker signed a bill called Lydia's Law to allow folks to have possession of CBD oil, even though the plant was illegal. So that created a whole lot of other issues that you had to discuss, the quality of the product, how was it regulated, violating other laws. So at the same time, we did try to make sure the tribes had inclusion in this venture of a new business per se, or access to medicine, and it was hemp. And so I did a lot of lobbying from 2014 to 2018 to ensure that the tribes were included into the Farm Bill. And I think we were very successful in getting that accomplished. The guy that wrote the bill actually asked if what we wanted in the bill, and we just wanted the word tribes, so that would protect tribes' interests going forward in this industry, and something I think we're going to have to revisit here very shortly with the Farm Bill up. So that's kind of a lot of work that we did with the hemp. At the same time, did a lot of meetings with the governor of Wisconsin's, our local senator and representatives, and trying to start to work out a compact similar to what we've seen in the state of Washington. Unsuccessful as it was, we still got them to understand the facts that this plant could do, and while they may have privately agreed, I think their party wasn't ready for it. As you can now see in Wisconsin, they're still not ready. But we still push forward. And so when Governor Walker signed that bill, he essentially legalized hemp in our eyes, as tribes have civil regulatory authority to modify their laws. And so that's what St. Croix did. And we just take it a lot farther than what the state was willing to go. Several negotiations with the state didn't go anywhere. So it was just really time to go to court. And they agreed to step aside. I'm proud to say St. Croix is the only tribe in the state of Wisconsin to get a letter from the state saying they will not interfere with our hemp initiatives, as we are a sovereign nation. And as long as we're respectful of federal law, then then they can't have a say in what we do. So that's kind of a crowning moment. As you know, shortly after that, they legalized hemp. So we felt like we had a big thing to do with forcing them, because we would have had exclusivity had we went to court and knew that we had really had the legal standing to go forward. So from then, it was also about educating tribes. About 2015, we have a Chippewa Federation that my associate Pete LeBlanc and I started in 2012, and we started to have cannabis as a conversation piece, just to gauge the vibe of the tribes and the members, because these meetings are public, and it was very packed room, in a loud, boisterous discussion, to say the least, on the positives and the negatives, really the unknown, which is, a really a beautiful thing that ICI provides, is that educational component that we provide, not only to lawmakers and people in the industry, but also these tribes, because they're the ones that really need it, because they have to make these decisions that in the best interest of their people going forward. That's kind of what we wanted to really help the tribes understand opportunities, whether it's for the medical cannabis, but also, with hemp being legal, there's a lot of dollars to be made in the hemp industry, as Rob can really go into detail about that. But, in working with ICI, I started partnering up with Rob about 3-4 years ago, when a mutual friend of ours, Patchy Danforth, would always say, I need to meet this guy, because she knew I was the guy working with the tribes on the cannabis issue. I've talked to tribes in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin since about 2014 on this issue. So it was really good to work with ICIA. I went to an IBG, Indigenous Business Group event, and they had cannabis on there, and I was asked to be on a panel. And we really built a relationship from there to, start working with ICI. And also through Rob's leadership as well, we came up with the idea to reform or create a task force in Wisconsin for the tribes to deal specifically on cannabis, because the bigger tribes in the state were reaching out and wanted to sit at the table with the Chippewa Federation and talk about this. But since we had already had discussions going on, we didn't feel like we needed to revisit, waste some time of our Federation member tribes. So we thought we'd create a task force and really get to the tribes and get them that information that is sorely needed. I'm really proud to say we have several tribes that really stepped up as far as creating, their own cannabis businesses in the tribes, hemp. We created a cannabis corporation here at St. Croix. We have tribes that have decriminalized cannabis on their tribal lands. We're trying to, do things within our sovereign responsibility in the best interest of our people going forward. And it is having clash with some of the state laws or lack thereof. So, working in partnership with ICIA and this task force, Rob really came up with a great idea about creating a Wisconsin Wellness Coalition, and really use that to build a network of advocates, experts, and really community leaders, and target those lawmakers and give them some good information with fact base. And I'm proud to say we've actually added a doctor on with ICIA too, so that's really validating what our efforts are to educate and provide information so that legislators can make good decisions as well. So we created the wellness campaign, and we launched it in September of last year through the election. We knew Wisconsin was one of 4 states where cannabis could be a determining factor in the outcome of the election. We did have some significant changes in the Senate and Assembly, and we felt, we had a small bit about that as well. So we wanted to continue this effort into January until inauguration. But during that time, meeting with Jason and other folks that have representatives that have, would like to see some legislation here in Wisconsin, we started to come up with a plan to really help the majority give some information so that they can make that decision to get over that hurdle. And I think that's really spurred us to continue this campaign into 2025. I've met with the tribes, mainly in the Chippewa Federation here in Wisconsin, first and foremost, and then I plan on reaching out to the bigger tribes as well. But we do have 4 or 5 right now on board that are helping contribute to the campaign, and so we're really excited that we can see something here in the fall and get our people legal access to this medicine sooner than later.
Yeah. It seems to me, and I want to go to Jason for a bit. It seems to me there's a role, and ICA is filling it really well, educating would-be operators, right, Indigenous operators in the cannabis space and hemp space around what is available, what sort of how to operate, right? And then there's the part that these conversations, as Michael was talking about, and you'd mentioned as well, sort of conversations with state regulators who either have no regulations now, like in North Carolina or Wisconsin, but there are tribal nations that want to participate. Like, how do the conversations generally go from your perspective, Jason, when you're meeting with either local or state representatives, or even in DC? Like, what is that conversation like when you're sort of helping carry the ICIA message and others for the people you represent? Like, are they receptive to it, curious about it, don't like when you open the door? Like, what are all those conversations like?
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from Rob and Mary Jane on this question too. But I will say it has been, it kind of depends on where you are geographically. Like, is there an underlying legal program? Well, obviously, your potential tribal partners are going to be much more interested, I think. We, Brian Vicente and I attended something called the Fed Bar in Albuquerque, a legal seminar where tribal leaders and tribal attorneys from across the country were there. And we presented that map that you showed earlier that shows where the hemp and cannabis programs are. And I got to tell you, it was not all positive reviews, right? So there were folks from prohibition states that said, well, we don't want anything to do with that, and that's okay. Like, we don't want to force this down anybody's throat, but there are other tribes, of course, who are very interested in the opportunities it presents. So we all know the stigma is real, right? And a lot of people believe the lies we were told during the war on drugs. And that's true for tribal folks. It's true for non-tribal folks. And there's, you got to chip away at that, I think. But, something like the ICIA, this national organization, international, really, you're helping to just share information, connect people, diffuse the stigma, and show that this is something that's really possible to help folks in Indian country. So yeah, I certainly am not the expert on all of the indigenous aspects of this. So I certainly defer to Mary Jane, Michael, and Rob on that.
Mary Jane, I want to go to you because Jason mentioned, I mean, you've probably been in lots of these conversations with would-be operators. Like, I'm really interested in when people are asking questions like, how do we do this? How does ICA help? And then I want to follow on with how can they get in touch? And if you give, I'll put the web address, by the way, while you're talking, so people who are out there listening to this, watching this, can actually get connected to you.
Yes, we get an extreme amount of intake, especially after we've presented at one of the national conferences or regional organizational convenings. And it is really a mixed bag. I mean, we have business development directors for tribal governments and tribal enterprises reaching out, wanting access to codes and ordinances, and to just kind of start that early process of doing their own internal Office of Legal Counsel due diligence around the issue. We get tribal members that are interested in maybe going after a state social equity license and want to know, like, are there any resources? Are there grants? Is there money available to be able to help them with some of these processes? But I think that the biggest intake and service that we're really working on right now is the network itself, of being able to help those different state regulators that are trying to figure out what that interface of tribal state relations look like. We've met with the California Office of Cannabis Management, Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management. Rob and I have met with state officials in Washington as well as Michigan. And so our work and role in that governance structure is really, around that educational piece. But our biggest intake is really around the lighting companies, the seed to sell track and trace companies, the web-based services and packaging. I mean, there's just really the bigger intake is from companies that have had a small dose of tribal cannabis because they've worked on a project, or they've been doing cannabis for the past decade and they saw that map and they're like, we're doing really great at what we do, mission, values aligned ethos with ICIA, and we want to service Indian country. And so that's really the biggest crosswalk, is to trusted partners, and that's because we've been doing this work long enough to know that there are a lot of untrusted partners out there trying to align with Indian country that have already bamboozled a few of our communities. So kind of serving as the hall monitors of Indian country cannabis, just by way of being organized, it was, I guess, a blessing in disguise of the organization.
Rob, I want to go to you. Thinking about where you and the organization are today and your role in the industry that it's been, like what do you expect to happen over the next year, 3, 5 years? Understanding that part of it is the Farm Bill to be, I don't know, reauthorized. I don't even know what the right word is at this point. Passed at some point, taken up in Congress. I don't actually know. But also more states coming online, more medical programs. States like Wisconsin, maybe North Carolina. Like, what do you expect over the next, I don't know, say 3 to 5 years from both your role in the industry, but also from ICIA? Like, if we have this conversation in 5 years from now, do you think we'll be talking about an entirely different landscape, or one that we're still sort of slow going?
Yeah, I think, what we've created is this massive mess. And that was the goal, right? Like, let's throw it all against the wall, but it's ours. As MJ said, it's our table. This is our canvas. So, what have we done in the last 3 years is gotten tribes organized in the way that they never have before. We've connected the dots between, operators and processors and manufacturers, and to help develop workforce. We've created, archives of compacts and regulatory frameworks, for tribes to share. We've instigated task force organic working groups, within states. These are all the things that, like, the nuance of, like, why do people do this? Because they feel like there's continuity with ICIA. So if we've created any form of anything, it's continuity. Like, this will be there beyond me and Michael and MJ and Jason, right? So something that can live on, and really, provide the leverage that tribes need to take advantage of opportunities, as opposed to be taken advantage of, which we historically have been. And so when you look at, what do tribes have, right? These are sovereign nations, 574 sovereign nations within our own country that can trade with each other, that have, their own bartering and treaty agreements, that have interstate commerce opportunities, with multiple number of goods through foreign trade zones, avoiding corporate tax on reservation, saving tax, on tariffs and duties. There's so many, like, look at that, like, all these things that you could do. And then you bring in cannabis and hemp, right? This exploding industry. And then this one demographic of tribal nations, the opportunities to leverage. So in 3 to 5 years, owning the market, setting a standard of what, clean plant medicine looks like, being a world trade partner, and getting indigenous, traditionally grown plant medicine to the world the right way, advocating, and sharing the voices of our elders, who, by the way, our communities are the largest serving veterans that there are. Like, I'm a Navy veteran. 90% of my family has served in the military. So, when you look at the demographics, our communities are the ones, that are impacted the most by the war on drugs, by trauma, by opioids, by all these things, by being in rural, desolate locations that actually could be good for farming. But we also have all these amazing opportunities to sort of revitalize, not only economically, but just health-wise, remediate the soil, really start to build, I would say, have an inclusive community where we're not, either on reservation or in Wisconsin, but we're just happy, residents and neighbors of one another. And I think ICIA has that opportunity to really lead that and be a community-based organization for the betterment of everybody. I mean, we're a massive melting pot, right? You know, I'm from Milwaukee, German, Polish, Bad River, and Oneida, never lived on the reservation. But now, you know, because of the work that we've done, creating this beautiful mess, you know, I have connections that, you know, that bring me in every different place. But the thing that I've found is everyone has common ground. And the larger of a network that we create, the more common ground that's found. And the more that people can read the room and understand, you know, who's really there to do things in a good way. And I see, you know, us continuing to do the work that we do. I see interstate commerce. I see international commerce. I see a hemp regulation and a cannabis regulation that is setting the standard for regulation, you know, to keep our communities safe. So I think that's a couple things that are pie in the sky, but I don't think they're far off from being attainable. And with the network that we've built, like I said, executing at a high level, these things will happen sooner rather than later.
I like it. Michael, I see you shaking your head, and we have a few more minutes, so I want you to sort of take what Rob said. And is there advice sort of from your where you sit and looking at the map that we shared with Jason, that others could take advice from you and say, oh, I see what they're doing, what Michael's doing, that we could do that here. Do you have advice for folks that are watching this and saying, I want to do what Michael's doing?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to the folks, especially tribal leadership. That's my focus, has been talking to a lot of tribal governments and the people that they represent. We're at such a higher rate of a lot of affliction of health ailments, from addiction, cancer, but also poverty levels, with a lot of, you know, we don't have a lot of good job creations in the remote areas that a lot of us are in. So to see an industry where there's the ability to provide not only medicine, but also the tools that can make us, with bags and goods, fiber, all these things, we could, be taking care of the environment by removing PFAS, getting people growing hemp. There's so much that we have to do, but I think the biggest thing we want me to get out there is the educational component, because it's taken a lot of us to help people understand that this is really a good thing as opposed to what we've been told. Now, coming from Indian country, there was not a lot what the federal government or state government told us that we didn't believe anyway. But it's really the people that raised us that were the ones that told us to stay away from this plant, because it would affect us in our ability to drive, the ability to have employment, credibility, freedom. Really, I mean, that's the big thing we don't talk enough about, is there's so many folks that are incarcerated for medicine. It's a shame. So I think to have to undo that process, that's kind of what my work is doing, and getting the tribes. We have seen growth in Wisconsin despite the lack of laws here. We do see tribes developing their own operations, partnering up with other tribes. We got smaller tribes and bigger tribes looking to work together. I mean, these are fabulous that we would have never seen, back in the day, because, we were always kind of been treating each other like adversaries through the gaming era for tribes, because, it was competition thing. But now we're impacting people's healthcare and potential economic growth for tribes. So the need to share and be very transparent in what we're doing, that's the biggest thing I've seen. I'm seeing that encouraging tribes to work together and be that louder voice, because my experience is the more of us together, the louder that voice is to get that message out. And I think we need to get this sooner than later. I think that's we got to get people to take action now, and you're going to see that in Wisconsin now and bursting into the future. I have a lot of excitement. I think we want to help Idaho out there. I'm racing Idaho to get legalization here in Wisconsin, and we got Mary Jane here, who, the creator gave her this name. She just was born to do what she's doing here, and her and Rob at the same birthdays. I mean, it's all aligned, and
it's all meant to be.
It's totally been an honor to really get on this ride and go to where things I've never seen before. It's really exposed me to a lot of different folks. Getting to know somebody like Gary Farmer, who's an ambassador for ICIA, and to be a recipient of the first award in his name, truly honored. And it's my call to action for that tribal inclusion. So just let the country know ICIA is coming, and we're going to be coming into your neighborhood, and we're going to get you guys to partner up with us as we go forward in the future. Thank you.
I think that is a beautiful place to end it. I really want to thank you, Jason, Mary Jane, Rob, and Michael. This will be the first of many conversations, I hope, but I appreciate your time and energy, enthusiasm, advocacy, all of those things. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Guys, take care.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who spoke, Michael, Rob, Jason, and Mary Jane. As I said, this will be the first of conversations, not the last. And I want to give a shout out, please, if you want to connect with the ICIA, there is a link there, indigenouscannabis.org. I want to thank Vicente and ICIA for making today possible. Thank all of you. If you do not already get our newsletter in your inbox, cultivated.news, please do. We like to drive important conversation in the cannabis industry just like this. Thank you all for being here. We will see everybody soon. Again, thank you to Vicente and ICIA.